We are live. Hello, everyone in the chat room.
Hello.
Can you see us? So I hope so, because no one said anything yet. They're probably waiting for us to officially start in a couple minutes.
Probably, so everyone's just waiting around. We're just waiting around, and everybody's waiting around. Yeah.
We'll probably, knowing my luck, we're actually not. Reload this page here really quickly. See what we got going on.
Now it says on my end it says live too. So unless they mean live and both participants are not deceased, this is what I make of it.
Okay.
It looks pretty neat. So exciting.
Ah, there we are. Excellent.
Yes, I just got the signal that we are live. So.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the first of what is hopefully not one question and answer session with Mr. StephenBrown and myself. I'm Matt Armstrong from the Pen Habit. And Stephen, if you want to do a quick intro as well.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I have always enjoyed question videos, and we received a lot of questions. So I think it would be a lot of fun to see see what we come up with as to answering. I look forward to it a lot, and I agree. This should not be the one and only Q&A we do, but it should probably be a series. I really look forward to it. We got some really interesting questions. So the one thing I think we said is that we will keep it to 1 hour, and that is a very pragmatic decision because we can probably answer questions all night, but where's the fun in that? Also, we need to keep some material for the next episode. That's how you should look at things.
Yeah, plus, I am a lazy man. So I think what we're going to do is we compiled all of the questions that I got the questions from my YouTube channel and Facebook and email and Stephen's YouTube video that he posted. So we've got about 11 pages of questions. Clearly, there's no way we're going to get through all of them in an hour. We're going to take turns asking questions from each of our channels and answering them. And I do have the chat up from the YouTube channel live. We may, if we have time, answer some questions from there or respond to something, but don't bet on it. So if we're ignoring you over in the chat, we don't mean to be jerks, but sometimes that just happens anyway.
It happens.
All right, so I'll go first. So
yep.
Goha Rosen asks, my question is, how many pens and inks do you guys own? Do you get to enjoy all of them, or do some of them never see the light of day? So what about you, Stephen?
Oh, I had a lot of pens, but even that, at the peak of that, was probably not close to what some people may think. I think it's kind of peaked at around 300, and right now that has declined significantly because I have sold off a bunch, quite simply because I never use them. So that's the answer to the second part of the question, I suppose. If pens are not used, I don't think there's any point in hanging on to them. As to inks, quite a couple. I have about 5 drawers full of ink. Looking behind you, Matt, I think we have probably a similar amount of inks. And yes, some are favorites and some are not. And there definitely are a few that I hardly ever use.
Yeah, I'm sitting at around 75 pens right now. Basically, I'm a little bit more willing to, I've not gathered as many. Of course, I haven't been doing this as long as Stephen either. But I kind of set myself a hard limit of 100. Yeah, I can go over it, but as soon as the season's over, I got to sell them off to help fund the pens for the next season. There's some that I'm the same way. I'm not a collector, I'm a user. And if you're going to buy them and not use them, then what's the point of having them? So I'd rather sell them off. As for inks, I'm sitting at about 130 bottles. I haven't counted just recently, which is a lot of ink. A lot of ink. And I want more. I always want more. But I have that shelf down there, which you can't see, has got probably 20 bottles of ink that I'm going to be selling because I don't ever. I don't care for the inks, don't like them. But I try to rotate through my inks quite a bit. So every time it comes time to ink up a pen, it's basically me standing in front of this wall going, I need an adult. So that's because too much, too many options, option anxiety. So that's
Yeah,
my question.
I think that's the problem with inks, that it's very tempting to get more and more, but how many shades of blue do you really need? That's I get a very dirty look here. So apparently not from Matt, but Gourmet Pens is around. So she has different opinions on that, but I really find myself grabbing the same 10 inks all the time, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
You know.
Michelle in the chat room asked, "Won't ink go bad after a few years?" Not necessarily. Really quickly, this bottle here is from the 1950s, and it's still completely usable. So long as you practice good pen hygiene, generally it won't necessarily go bad after a couple of years. You just have to make sure that you don't have mold growing in it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the kicker.
Yeah. All right. You want to grab a question from your list, Stephen?
Yeah, I'll grab a question. From Chintan Pandya, who asks, my question is to you, Stephen. How much of an EDC fan are you? When you buy a knife, for example, is it purely for the practical purpose, or do you like collecting it too? That's a question I can answer very quickly. It is very practical. I really don't consider myself to be a collector of knives. I don't own so many knives, actually. That is a very practical thing, that's the occasional Swiss Army knife that ends up in a bag here and there, but that's pretty much it. So I'm not a giant EDC guy. I know there's a lot of overlap between the EDC world and the fountain pen world, just like there's a lot of overlap between the watch world and the fountain pen world, but I am not a collector in that regard at all. Matt, I don't know if you are very much into that or not at all, but
I have a knife. Just one, and I keep it at home, and I use it to open. Basically, I bought it to open boxes of pens. All the stuff that gets shipped to me via mail. That's pretty much what I use it for. So I'm not into that too much. I'm not the rugged outdoorsy carry, everyday carry kind of stuff. That's just not my thing.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so Andres Ruval asks, Matt, what is your musical background? I know you play keyboard, and I'm curious if you ever studied music formally. What do you listen to? What have you played, etc.? By the way, I'm a classical pianist, if you were wondering. So I've been playing the piano since I was 4. I studied at the Utah State University's youth conservatory until we moved to Michigan when I was 9. My neighbor across the street was a PhD in piano performance and pedagogy and taught at the local college. And so I studied with her until I was 16. I was kind of on the path to do the classical piano thing, but it just my heart wasn't in it. So I kind of, right about that same time, I got involved in musical theater and singing. My undergraduate degree is in music dance theater, so I have a lot of vocal training as well. I play a bunch of different instruments at varying levels of proficiency, and I've taught voice at the college level for several years. So I have a pretty solid musical background, but I am one of those kind of musical jack of all trades, master of none. I can improvise, I can play, I can sing quite a bit of stuff. But and as for the kind of stuff I listen to, I like pop music. I'll admit it right up front. Probably one of my favorite singers is Eva Cassidy, the young lady who passed away from cancer when she was 38, and all of her stuff came out after her death. One of the most beautiful voices in the history of mankind, I think. But I like a lot of vocal music, piano-heavy music, string-heavy music, and I listen to a lot of theater music. So that's my musical background. And Stephen, I know you have a background in, or you listen to a lot of like chant and that sort of thing.
Yes, I do. I have, as a child, had music lessons in playing the recorder, the flute, and pretty much that went on until my parents begged me to stop because it was not really leading in any sensible direction. That's, of course, I exaggerate a bit there, but I like music. I like all kinds of music. I love music that has been described as depressing by some and nauseating by others. I like music that is much more mainstream, but when it comes to producing music, that is not a successful thing. Although I have recently decided that it would be nice to invent a new type of fountain pen related music, which is called nib, but that is not yet in a very concrete form. So I'll keep you posted on the doings of that.
There'll be a lot of clicking and squeaking.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of hard. Yeah, I don't know if we can come up with something for that. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, I have I think a very interesting question from Blair Vesey, who asks both of us, on average, how much time do you spend on pen-related activities? Does it ever feel like work, or is it always a break from the daily grind? Well, that I think is a very interesting question. I use fountain pens quite a lot, both, I would say, professionally, and by that I just mean at work. I draft a lot of things by hand just because I find that a great way to organize my thoughts and get them onto paper in as coherent a manner as my brain allows. But I also use them for fun. I use them to write letters. I use them for grocery lists even. So I definitely use them a lot. Now, when it comes to fountain pen activities, then I would mainly think of the reviews that I do. And there I bear in mind when I do a, say, 12-minute fountain pen review, it does not take 12 minutes to make that. First, you, of course, have to get the pen, but once it's in your possession, I typically use it for multiple days, multiple weeks, to get an idea of how it writes, what its strong points are, what its weaker points are. And that, of course, that takes time. And then the actual recording of the video, usually I do things in one take because I just say what I want to say and that's it. But then there's the editing of the videos. There is the adding sound if necessary. There is the uploading to YouTube. So I would say that the average 12-minute review is about an hour of work, and that is not counting the actual testing of pens, which is multiple hours of work. So that definitely takes some time. Now, whether it feels like work or a chore, the pen work, not so much. Dealing with strange people on YouTube, more so. I mean, the just recently, by coincidence, I know that Matt and I were pretty much called a prostitute by someone because we get free pens and then only say nice things about them. That's
If we're prostitutes, I need to get paid more. I'm just not. I'm giving too much away for free if that's the case.
Yeah, exactly. Because the funny thing is that all my reviews are free, so you don't really have to purchase anything to watch them, and yet I invest a whole lot of time into them. So that doesn't really seem like it adds up. However, I will immediately add to that the vast majority of people I interact with are extremely nice, are really supportive,
Absolutely.
and are just great people that I absolutely love doing it for, and that is why it's not a chore.
For me, it's I put in, if I were to put in a weekly number of hours, I'm guessing somewhere between 15 and 20 hours a week I spend on pen-related activities. Now, I use pens all day at work, so and I would do that even if I weren't doing these videos. But I because I use multi-camera setup for my videos, there's a lot of more intricate editing that I have to do to fit everything together. Excuse me. But I agree with Stephen. I think the greatest part of my time is spent managing the online aspect of what I do. So whether it be answering questions on YouTube or on Facebook or on Twitter, or writing the blog posts or managing the comments in Discuss. So that takes up quite a bit of time. I'll be honest, there are days where it feels like a chore, where it's like, I just don't care about doing this anymore. But I really love pens. I love using them. I love writing with them. I love talking to people about them. So it's, yeah, occasionally. So occasionally it feels like a little bit of a chore, but it's still something I really love to do 99.5% of the time. So.
Yeah, same here.
All right. So the next, I'm going to combine two questions into one because they're pretty similar. Bianca McDermott asks, I would like to know what you two see as the biggest difference in your personal tastes for pens. Do you love the same ones or argue the virtues of your favorite over the other guys? Also a current GOAT from each of you, greatest of all time. And then Jan Scott asks, have you ever seen the others review and thought, what is he on? And as you have disagreed so much, and what was the pen or ink? Conversely, have you ever seen a review that made you want to try that pen or ink or look again? So I don't know that we have drastically different tastes in pens. I think there's a fair bit of similarity. You know, every person's going to have slight differentiation in what they like and what they don't like. But I've never seen one of Stephen's reviews and thought he's smoking crack, which is you know. Now to be fair, I don't watch all of Stephen's reviews, and I'm sure he doesn't watch all of mine. Especially if it's a pen that I know I'm going to be reviewing. I don't want to see someone else's perspective first before I review it. Now, if it's a pen I'm interested in, I'll watch it. You know, that I want to get anyway, I'll watch it in a heartbeat. But I don't think we have a lot of differentiation. My key or my preference for pen is, does it write well, and is it pretty? And so long as it meets one of those two things, I'm cool with it. And as for my greatest of all time, I'm going to be doing a video probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks for the end of my season 2. But this is my current greatest of all time, which is the Omas Ogiva celluloid in the Brown Arco celluloid. So that is my greatest of all time at the moment. It changes almost weekly, but okay.
That's normal. Yeah, it's normal. No, I agree. But to be honest, that has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with, also for me, I don't really watch a lot of other people's reviews either, and that has nothing to do with them as reviewers. But I have to do my own reviews. You only have so much time in a day at some point, and I can imagine that some people may underestimate how much time it takes to do all this. I mean, both you and I also have day jobs, right? This is not we do not get paid to review pens or sell them, so that it all adds up. What I'm always extremely impressed by, and also very jealous of, is the extremely high production value of your videos. Because I look at your videos and then I feel kind of like an amateur who's using dodgy equipment and old Soviet era stuff or something. But I really like to see you always have very crisp, clear video, very good audio, and that's wonderful. So I do find myself turning to your videos. For example, if I really want to see something in really high resolution, I will always check it out. And that I think is very useful. But I also recognize very much what you say. I am not someone who really researches a pen extensively before reviewing it. Clearly, you need to know what the nib is and what. But to get all kinds of other people's opinions kind of muddies my opinion of it, I think.
And pens are different. You know, I have a couple of friends who are movie reviewers, and they get early access to a movie before it comes out. And so they're able to form their own opinion before there are these hundreds and hundreds of movie reviews. In the pen world, I think it's a little different because I don't get anyway, early access to pens before they come out. And a lot of times, because I need 3 or 4 weeks or a month to play with the pen before I write the review, by the time I'm ready to do the review, people have written, you know, great posts on FP Geeks or Fountain Pen Network or on Reddit reviewing the pens, and it's like, that's great. I just want to know the specs. That's all I want to know. So, but yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. But I will say, before I got in, or right as I was getting into fountain pens, Stephen's videos, I watched probably 200 of them because it was
Oh,
right
you're
when
the one who watched all my videos. You're the
yeah,
one
I
viewer.
basically started at the beginning because I've kind of got that whole completist thing going on. And so I have watched lots and lots and lots of Stephen's videos. I still love them. But another thing that's kind of interesting, and I don't know if you're dealing with this at all, Stephen, is that I'm finding it harder to not get bored doing my own reviews because it's a pen. There's only so much you can talk about. And so I struggle a little bit with that whole, it's like, well, I'll say the exact, here's my criteria, my 15 criteria that I talk about in the video, and that's it. And so I always try to find something that's a little different to talk about.
Well, it's very interesting. Actually, the next question of my list ties in exactly to this, which is Jordan Schneid, who says, how much enjoyment do you get these days from pen reviews? Does it ever feel like a chore, an underpaid / underappreciated job? And if so, what keeps you going? And I think that ties in nicely with what you just said. I know the feeling, and it's hard. I want to give, and I'm sure it's the same for you, I want to give every pen fair treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter whether it's literally a $1 pen or a $1,000 pen. I will put it through the same tests before I review it. I will find what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and then do the right sample. But it can definitely be difficult to cover specific pens when you have already seen something that's very similar to it. For example, I have reviewed a couple of Kaweco sport pens, and they come out with special editions, but it's the same sport, it's just a different color. And I want to review that because it's hot at the moment and people are asking me about it. What is this new finish like, etc. So I want to do that, but a sport is a sport. So whether it's brown or blue or yellow or green or transparent, it is still a sport. And then it can definitely be difficult to not rush through it. And that is something I know that I have to always be careful of, that I don't go too fast. And then even then, there are people who say I'm long-winded, and I know that I am, but that can be tough. So how I try to keep it interesting for myself by really thinking, okay, what I'm reviewing now, this B.R.E fountain pen, this could be someone's first pen. They could be Googling this one day, they could find my videos, they could find my review of this, and they can decide based on that review whether they want to purchase this or not. And that means that I have to give it the exact same amount of attention I give any other pen. I'm not saying that because this is a more inexpensive pen, but yes, you know what? It has a nib and a feed. It's what most fountain pens have, you know. So you can't really make things a lot more interesting than that. But what you can do is try to showcase the pen. Do show it from every angle. Do say what you like about it, and you know, in that way, I think I try to keep things interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because do I feel underappreciated? No. I find that the community is very, very appreciative, and even people who disagree with my opinions are 99 times out of 100 really respectful and grateful that I go to the effort of doing it. So I'm really grateful for that. Underpaid sometimes, but not too bad. But you know, like we said before, sometimes it does feel a little bit like a chore, especially when you're working toward a deadline. I try to do at least one new review a week, more often two. And I also, you know, work a full-time job, and I run an audiobook production company, so I'm often narrating books and things like that. So sometimes it does get to be a little bit busy, but I love doing it, and I'm really grateful for the people who appreciate it. And so there you go. All right. Well, Kleber Mori asks, what are your thoughts on Japanese versus Western pen companies and their pens? And what is an innovation in the pen market that is waiting to happen, but no one has tackled yet? Why don't you hit that one first, Stephen?
Yeah, that's a question I think about every day. No, Japanese versus Western pens first. I think I can say I have used quite a large number of Japanese pens in both the lower end of the price range as well as in the higher echelon, and I cannot help but say that these pens are usually made with great eye to detail. I am yet to see a rough edge or whatever on Japanese pen. Yeah, I can honestly say that I've just not encountered that. So that's great. We know that those nibs typically run on the fine side, which is something you either appreciate or not. Some people love Japanese extra fine nibs, and you basically get a needlepoint nib, and that's very useful for some applications. Western pen manufacturers, I cannot say Japanese pens are a bit more utilitarian, because we have beautiful urushi models or other lacquer stuff that Maki-E that is great. I mean that blows pretty much any Western pen out of the water, I think. But my problem with that is the practicality of these pens. I mean, Maki-E is really nice, but I would continuously be terrified that I would chip the lacquer or do something to it to ruin it. Of course, the same thing can be said for an expensive Western pen. So that's pretty much the only issue I see. I have had very good experiences with Japanese nibs. The only time I did not was with the custom 823. That I found that a weird nib that ran dry, but could have just been a lemon. So I would say quality control was very high. The final thing about fountain pen revolutionary things that are waiting to happen. I am still waiting for a silenced fountain pen that makes no noise when you write, so that it's a complete stealth pen that is completely silent. I'm also waiting for a truly self-filling fountain pen, so a pen that actually rolls toward the bottle of ink when it's empty and then unscrews it, and just, I think that's going to take a while before we get that. And also, I'm waiting for a fountain pen which has a built-in heat pad so that it can warm up, so that when you touch it, it's not cold to the touch. But that's all I can come up with.
Yeah, for me, the Japanese pens, and I'm going to generalize here, they just write. Every time they just write. In general, they tend to be not quite as smoothed as a lot of Western nibs, but I've never had a problem putting a nib to paper with a Japanese fountain pen and having it not write, ever. With Western pens, I feel like there's a wide range. Some manufacturers have, like, in the same batch, will have an amazing nib and a really not so great nib. Whereas between manufacturers, even manufacturers that have their nibs made at the same company, there's a differentiation in the nibs, whereas I feel like there's a lot of similarity in the nibs of Japanese pens. From a design aesthetic, I almost exclusively prefer Japanese or Western pens, especially the Italian pens. You know, I've said this before, but you know, I'm kind of like an Italian pen, flashy and temperamental. So I tend to like those quite a bit. And as for a technology or a innovation in the pen market, I would love a pen where you could very easily dial in the amount of wetness for a pen. Because if I'm going to use cheap paper, I want to be able to turn a knob and say, sign a credit card receipt with a very dry line. If I'm going to be on my Tomoe River, I want to pour ink on that paper so I can play with sheen. That would be an innovation I would love to see someone figure out how to do. And as Richard Binder said, it's, you know, a fountain pen is just a controlled leak. So you'd think that wouldn't be too terribly difficult to figure out how to do.
That actually sounds like great. Of course, I was joking. I was pretty much joking because I couldn't come up with something sensible. But this actually makes a lot of sense. And one thing I came up with now is that I would love to see a fountain pen that can use multiple types of ink in one thing. And of course, they exist. I mean, I know there were vintage pens that there are double-ended pens, but I would like to see something with one nib that you can kind of like a little revolver that you can just rotate the cartridge or something, and then you have that. That would be awesome. But we don't have that. All right.
Okay, I think it's your question.
Yeah, I actually have a question from Glenn Higley that has 6 sub-questions, but I think we can answer them fairly quickly because they're very to-the-point questions. Maybe I should not go through them because I will definitely forget the first one while we're done. But the first question is, are you willing to buy $300+ pens online without having seen or used them? What do you think? What do you say to that?
Yes, because I don't really have a choice. I don't have any local pen stores with pens over $300 anymore. The one that I had here was has since closed. So almost all of my over $300 pens are bought online, having never seen them.
Yeah, it's a practical thing. I am extremely fortunate to have a few very nice pen shops relatively close by. The closest one is 15 minutes by train, which is great. I would definitely, if you are fortunate enough to visit pen stores, to definitely go there. The reason being that there's Akkerman in The Hague, and I go there and I try out pens, and there's a great guy who works there, Paul, who knows everything about pens, and he will just let you try 3 or 5 models of the same, so examples of the same model. So you will get 5 vanishing points in black in a fine nib, and you can try them all out. And I was astonished to see the giant amount of variation between nibs of the same brand on the same pen model. You can have one nib that writes extremely smoothly and quite wetly, and another nib on the same model that just writes dryly. So, or even scratchier. That's really fascinating. So that is a great benefit. But having said that, yeah, it's not always practical. There are people who live in countries apparently where there's not a single pen shop. So sometimes you don't have a choice. Personally, I have no issues with it. I prefer to buy them in a real shop so that I know what I'll be getting. But yeah, sometimes you just have to.
Well, and I think that the you know, if you're into the hobby for very long, one of the first things you should learn how to do is work on your own nibs. The other thing you should do if you're worried about buying online is buy from a company that has a good return policy. Because if you don't like if you ink it up and you don't like the pen, you're going to want to return it. And so if you buy from some eBay seller who doesn't have a great return policy and you get a pen you don't like, your only other option is to sell it online and probably take a loss in the process. So
yeah,
that would be my thought.
Yeah, and I think that's very good reasoning too. The next question, actually, the 2 next questions tie into what you just said. The first one is, who are your favorite nibmeisters and why? And the third one is, have you ever ground your own nibs? My nibmeister experience, I have used nibs by Richard Binder, so binderized nibs as he calls it, which are tuned by him. I have had a couple of nibs worked on by Mike Masuyama. I have tried a pen that was tuned by John Mottishaw, and I have used a Parker 51 that was re-tipped and so polished by Greg Minuskin. I have enjoyed all those experiences. My personal favorite is Mike Masuyama because he was, as I understand it, trained by, I thought it was Mr. Nagahara himself from Sailor nib fame. I could be wrong there, so correct me if I'm wrong, but no matter what, that man knows his cookies. I took a pen to DC that it was a Conway Stewart, had an italic medium nib. It skipped like crazy. I gave it to him. 5 minutes later, it never skipped again. So it's amazing what a nibmeister who knows what he's doing can do to your pen. So my money is on Mike. What about yours?
Well, Mike has worked on two pen. Well, he's worked on one pen, which was also a Conway Stewart with an italic medium that was or it was an italic fine, which was a problem. And then I also got a Masuyama ground Franklin Christoph nib. And I have used a couple of pens with nibs that were tuned by John Mottishaw. In the case of one of those nibs, it was actually, with the Mottishaw nibs, the tines were actually out of alignment. So I suspect when they were recapping the pen, someone nicked it out of alignment or something like that. But it was really easy to get back in place. I have said this before. I think Mike Masayama is both a wizard and a genius. I've never heard anyone say a bad thing about his work. So, and the work that he's done on the two pens that I use has been stellar. So I really am a big fan of his. I've also heard good things about Dan Smith, formerly of FP Geeks fame, and Pendleton Brown and a couple of other folks. I've not had the opportunity to use them, mainly because I buy the nibs I want. I don't buy them to have them ground into specialty nibs. That's just not really my thing. And I have, to the second part of your question, actually have started learning how to grind my own nibs. Once by trying to unmangle a sailor that I dropped nib first on a hardwood floor that belonged to someone else, unfortunately. So since the nib was already ruined, I figure I might as well try to make it from a zoom nib into a broad nib, which I have done, and it works quite nicely now. So
I think it's a lot of fun. I grind them. I'm now trying to get to the point where I feel comfortable to turn round nibs into italics. That is, with varying degrees of success, but it's a skill, and that means you need to practice, and sometimes it works out better than other times. But it's a lot of fun. Clearly, you should not take your $600-700 pen and just grind away if you have no clue what you're doing. But if you start with some cheaper, for example, Chinese pens, it's a lot of fun. You can get a lot more line variation. You can do a lot of stuff, and if you ruin a pen, it's not that terrible. I am definitely not a nibmeister, but I can see myself exploring that more and see what I can come up with. All right, there's 3 more questions, and I think they're all very interesting. The next one is, if you could use only one brand of ink, which would it be? What would you do? I think wall of ink, so I'm very interested.
I think Mont Blanc would be my choice in inks. I like their production line a lot. I love their limited editions. I've yet to use a limited edition that I wasn't heartbroken wasn't a production ink. So they have all been really well behaved, easy to clean out. So in general, I think plus it's one of my favorite greens, one of my favorite purples, my favorite turquoise of all time. So I'm a Mont Blanc guy, I think. What about you?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because that would be my answer too. I know it may sound horribly elitist that we don't go for some brand that has been around for centuries and that, but honestly, I have not had issues with Mont Blanc inks. There used to be the really cool Midnight Blue, which was the iron gall ink. Very fascinating ink. I know you can get other iron galls too, but something like Irish Green or Toffee Brown, those are, I just love those inks.
Yeah,
great shading.
Forgot about Toffee Brown. It's probably my favorite still in production brown color right now.
And I mean, they're just great. They flow well. They have no issues. They shade well. I don't see anything undesirable in those inks. So yeah. I love them. All right. Now, if you had to limit yourself to one manufacturer for all of your pens, who would you choose?
So I think it would be a knockdown, drag-out fight between Visconti and Omas. I think those would be the two where I would be spending a lot of my... If I had to pick one, it would be one of those two.
Yeah, I agree. They make really good stuff. This actually, you can start to think about the next question, because that's his final question, but that ties into this. Which line of pens offers the best writing experience for the money? And I agree. For me, I love Visconti. I do not like everything they do. Some of their outrageously expensive, weird limited editions, I think, are just too gaudy, too much. But I got an Opera Master Crystal, and then I got an Opera Master in Black D'Arche, and then I got an Opera Master Australis, and then I got an sort of Opera Master Kakadu. this is my pen. This is my model. I love the size. I love the feel, the weight, the filling system. I love everything about it. That's all I can say. I know they're very expensive, but
Yep.
for these
I've got
pens,
the Davina right now sitting at
yeah,
my desk, so that's one of my
that's an excellent
favorites
one
too.
too. So I just love it, and I know that these are not $50 pens, but they are really really good. Now, the other question: what line of pens offers a better writing experience for the money? Well, obviously that is very subjective. Best for the money, I would not say my Opera Masters. I think if you want the best value for the money, go for something like a Lamy Safari or a Kaweco Sport. They write. I have not had issues with them. They always write, and they are very affordable. Will they offer you an extremely luxurious feeling and the idea that you are using an extremely luxurious pen? Not really, no. But they will write and they will get the job done always. So I like those models too.
Yeah, for best for the money for me, uh, I think right now best for the money would be Faber Castell.
Hmm.
So they're the emotion
Absolutely.
basic, the recently reviewed loom that I did. It's probably the best writing pen for under $50 I've ever used.
Those have amazing nibs.
Yeah,
Every pen you mentioned has amazing nibs. That's actually that's a great suggestion because those are wonderful for what you pay for them.
yeah.
I agree.
So if you're willing to go a little bit higher, I think, at least in my experience, and I know not everyone has had this experience, I think Platinum has is a really really good writing pen, and depending on how you buy them, they're not terribly expensive. I got my 3776 for under $100, I think. So really great writing pen in that case. So, okay, let me go back up to my questions. Let's see where we're.
So
Oh,
someone in the chat asked if I would put Noodlers in an M1000. Um, I think that's sorry to barge in. I think that's an interesting question. My personal response would be in an M1000, probably fine. In a pen with any type of rubber parts, no.
so, yeah. I've never put noodlers in a pen. The only pens I have with latex or rubber sacks have been vintage pens, and I Noodlers is one of those brands where I don't have. I've got several bottles of Noodlers. I just don't put them in vintage pens. I also don't put them in piston fillers because most of the Noodlers inks I have are the heavily staining ones, and I don't
Yeah,
want my piston fillers stained. So long as you understand what the principles of your noodlers are, or what the properties of your noodlers are, um, you know,
I
make
agree.
make your own decision.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, go
Um,
on.
no, okay. So I know the answer to this question for you, Stephen, but the Harrises asked, "Have you ever spilled a bottle of ink? If so, how bad was it? If not, any close calls?" The short answer for me, so I'll just pass this off, is no, I have not. I have not even had a close call. It's only a matter of time.
I yeah, it is. I can say I I have spilled more ink than you have put in your pens. It's I'm a walking hazard. That doesn't just apply to inks and pens. I drop stuff. I walk into things. It's I'm a lot of fun to interact with because I'm just a living disaster. Now, I will say at this point that someone in this room who may or may not be Gourmet Pens is nodding enthusiastically. So yeah, I am walking this out. As the ink, yeah, I dropped. I mean, I dropped a bottle of Visconti Traveling Inkwell. I tilted it in a review, and ink just spilled all over my laptop. And I have recently, I had Noodler's Dragon's Napalm. It's a very intense orange in a smaller ink. I poured it from one of those 4.5 ounce bottles into a smaller inkwell. I was about to put it down on the table, and I still don't know what happened. It slipped my fingers or something. It hit the table full force. It spilled ink all over the wall. And, I tell you, that may be another reason for me to not use Noodlers. It took 3 or 4 layers of primer. I had to sand down the wall. The ink kept coming through the paint. It was distressing. In the end, it looked fine, but yeah, I spilled a lot of ink.
Yeah, I'm glad I have not had that experience yet, but like I said, it's only a matter of time. There certain manufactured bottles. I don't understand the design behind these bottles.
No.
Visconti's bottles, for instance, are a joke. Why would you
Yeah.
have a tall bottle with a really skinny base? It's ridiculous. Noodler's bottles, they're standard bottles, I get, but again, they're tall and narrow.
Yeah.
It's like, this is ink. Let's have a wide base on the bottle, please. So I think right now my favorite bottles for filling are the Mont Blanc shoe-shaped bottles
Yeah,
and
those are great.
the Caran d'Ache chromatics bottles, the hexagonal kind of slanted ones. The Iroshizuku bottles are pretty good too, but yeah, those Visconti bottles are ridiculous.
This is a Visconti inkwell. I'm going to be extremely careful because it would be very ironic if I would drop it now. But this is very thick crystal. It's super heavy, and that makes it so pleasant to use because it has such a thick base. I'm going to put it down before disaster strikes, but that's really cool. But of course, you have to buy it separately, put your ink in. I don't understand why there's not more manufacturers who make Mont Blanc type bottles. Are they great looking? Not really, but they work very, very well. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, is it your turn, I think?
I think it is. I have a question from Sudhir Kalyanikar, who asks both of us, what made us get into reviewing fountain pens and associated stuff, and in my case also everyday carry items. Also, do you think it requires a specific kind of personality to be able to review and share your thoughts on video? And did you train and put in any special effort, or are you guys both just born showman? Well, I'm not sure about being a born showman. What got me, I'll tell the extremely expurgated version of this story. What made me get into reviewing fountain pens? Brian Goulet, pretty much. I had a Visconti Traveling Inkwell. I was getting into fountain pens. I watched his videos. I contacted him and said, have you seen this? He said no. And I said, I guess I could do a YouTube review. He said, you should. And I did. Well, I will say the rest is history. So that's why I'm sitting here right now. So that's how I got into it. It somehow took off. I know that some people were instrumental in that because they shared my videos and people liked it and I struck the right chord. A lot of people don't like it. And that brings me to the second part of the question. Do you need some type of special personality? Well, I don't think you probably should not be extremely shy because you will be putting yourself out there. And that also means that you are going to get nasty people. And I'm not just talking about trolls who comment on your hairstyle or something, but there will be people who will present you with interesting argumentation on why you are wrong, why you are doing your videos wrongly, why you don't know anything about fountain pens, why, etc. You have to be able to deal with that. And I know it is very easy to say, oh, just ignore it, but that's not how it works. That is not. If that would be that easy, then there would be no need for psychologists in the clinical field. It's not that easy to just ignore what people say about you. And finally, did you train and put in any special effort? No, I did not. I have always enjoyed giving presentations in any form, be it a scientific presentation, be it a teaching context. So I like communicating in that sense. And I do think that as you do it more often, it gets easier. You start to develop your routines and what you're comfortable with, and it will become more streamlined. I know that I talk a lot, so I know that in the reviews I really have to keep myself to the point. At that note, why don't you give your opinion on this?
Well, clearly I do have a little bit more training in this area because I studied as an actor and worked as an actor for several years before I got tired of being poor. So and that's really the reason why why my videos are a little bit more technical, because I already had all the lights and I had the cameras and I had the sound equipment. So I have a background in video production and audio production. as well as a lot of experience performing. Why did I get into doing it? Again, I think Brian Goulet and Stephen both had a huge impact in me doing it. But I've always been kind of a give my opinions kind of guy. That's, for better or for worse, that's just kind of part of my personality. I mean, I used to write movie reviews. I, for a while there, was going to do a podcast called Matt Reviews Everything, in which I reviewed everything. I was doing root beer reviews for a while. It's just kind of part and parcel to who I am. Plus, I felt like when I was getting started, there wasn't a lot of, I didn't feel like there was a lot of reviews for people who were still learning about the hobby. I felt like Stephen and Brian were both kind of experts already. And so when I got started, my thought was, well, I'm going to do these reviews so people can see me migrate my way and learn through this hobby. And which is kind of weird because I now feel like people look at me like I'm some expert, and I still feel like I don't have clue, number one, what I'm talking about. And then kind of going along with what Stephen said, yes, you do have to have a certain personality, which I have had to develop. You know, the getting up and performing has never been a problem, but when you're on stage, it's pretty safe. You don't get a lot of, the only feedback you get, at least here in the US, is applause, like the amount of applause. People don't boo and hiss and throw things at you. So going online was a little harder for me. It hit me pretty hard early or toward the end of season 1, which is one of the reasons why I took a hiatus before starting season 2. And it has helped. I've had to develop ways with coping with the feedback, because I have a really, I don't do rejection well, or haven't done rejection well, but I've gotten a lot better at it over the course of the last year or so.
Well, you know, in that regard, I would almost say that doing these reviews is very therapeutic, because in a way, I'm not just for you, I'm talking about myself too. You do get to handle feedback better because you have to. It's either you quit or you somehow learn how to accept that. And I do want to emphasize there is nothing wrong with giving someone feedback. There's nothing wrong with it. And of course, you can disagree with the ways Matt and I do our videos. Of course. But maybe if you have never done a fountain pen review and we check out your channel and there is nothing and all we see is annoyed comments at other people's videos, people like Matt and I would think, what exactly are you talking about? Because you have no experience. You don't know how much effort goes into this. And again, that doesn't mean you can't give feedback. Of course you can. And I know that I have changed things in my videos because people requested it. But it is a growing thing. It's a living thing, and I notice in myself that you grow into it. So I don't think it really requires a special personality, but yeah, you will deal with stuff that is not so nice. But you will also deal with a lot of stuff that is very nice. And the warmth and kindness of people is always great, I think.
Yeah. Okay, we're running short on time here, so we'll go through the next couple of questions. Grumpy Communist asks, great username, by the way.
Yeah, I love it.
Asks, did your father bring you into the fountain pen hobby? I heard you saying things like "my dad loves" hundreds of times. So the short version of my entry into fountain pens, I talk about it more in my very first video. My dad has used a fountain pen since he graduated from college back in the 70s. He only had a couple, and always used the same blue or black Mont Blanc cartridges or Waterman cartridges that you bought at Office Max or Staples or wherever. Here in Seattle, there's a famous outdoor market called Pike Place Market, and there they have a gentleman who sells these hand-turned kit pens. And so I bought one of those for him for Christmas back in 2012, excuse me. And after I got back in 2013, I was like, it kind of got stuck in my head. I was like, I want to try one of those. So I got one, my first one there, and it's when I had problems with it, I went online to do more research, and that's when I stumbled down the rabbit hole. So indirectly, yes, he got me into fountain pens, but it's more realistic to say that I reintroduced him to fountain pens because he'd always had the same 2 pens up until I got involved in the hobby, and now he's up to 15 or something like that, and has several bottles of ink, and we trade pens back and forth. And so, and I, in addition to him, his twin brother, my grandmother, my nieces, I've kind of spread the virus through my family. I've got an uncle who got into it, so I consider myself patient zero for the fountain pen virus, or FPV. So that's kind of how I got into the whole hobby. And did one of your parents have something that got you going, Stephen?
Yeah, that's a long story, but the short version is my dad hates fountain pens. He's just not. It doesn't do anything for him, and I have tried to infect him with the virus, and it has succeeded to a certain degree, but it's just not the pen for him. He loves his fine liners and rollerballs, and that's it, and that's fine. My mother is more into fountain pens, but she is not a collector. She has a few pens, and that's pretty much it. She's very satisfied with that, which is probably the sensible thing to do. Right? You don't really need hundreds of pens. But my granddad had just one fountain pen. That was an old Parker 75, but he loved that. So I think it's definitely that was my mother's father. So I definitely think it's her side of the family that gave me the fountain pen gene. Well,
okay.
Shall we do one more?
Sure.
I have I think that's actually a very nice one. I think we can combine these two, and that would be a great way to round this out. I got a question from Phil Lancaster and then Matthew Beddoe, who ask similar things. Phil asks, you may keep one pen from your collection and only one. Which one would you choose and why? And Matthew Beddoe asks, if you were to be sent to a desert island where you would have no contact with the outside world for, let's say, 5 years, and you could take one pad or book of paper, one bottle of ink, and one pen, which would these be and why? So I think the question is, what's your favorite pen, ink, and notebook? That seems to connect the two questions. Well, I would say my favorite right now, and probably forever, my favorite pen is my Visconti Opera Master demonstrator. I know it doesn't look like a demonstrator, that's because there's ink in there, but it is a demonstrator. This has a fantastic double broad palladium nib that is superb. If you turn it over, you pretty much get a crisp italic. So this is such a nice versatile pen. Power filler system. I love everything about it. The nib is smooth. It doesn't skip. It is great. As to inks, that's a little bit more difficult. Right now, I had Iro Shizuku Konpeki in that pen, which I had not really used before. That's a great turquoise, I suppose, turquoise blue. I love that. Probably at this point, my favorite ink is Diamine Autumn Oak. I really love that ink. It is not necessarily the most business-like color because it's an orange, dark orange brownish color that has great shading.
It's such a great color. Oh my gosh, yeah, I just love that color.
It is amazing. I really love it. And that in the Opera Master is spectacular because it's so broad and juicy. Finally, notebook. That's a tough one because I use all kinds of notebooks to just test out pens and fiddle around in. It's hard to get around Rhodia paper. In their notebooks, it can be a bit weird, odd, broken white, which I don't care for too much. So I will say either Rhodia or Oxford. I really love Oxford paper. It's fairly inexpensive and it's superb. It has pretty much no bleed through whatsoever. So that my choice would be Visconti Opera Master, Diamine Autumn Oak, and a whatever type of Oxford paper notebook.
Okay. I think, again, pen, we're going to talk the Omas Ogiva. This has an extra flexibile nib on it, which if you've used the Ogiva Alba, this is like 5 times more flexible than the flexible nib on the Ogiva Alba, which is really weird because I have both, and this one is significant. I mean, this is very, very close to a vintage flex.
Well, that's an inconsistency again that I mentioned earlier. It's just really weird how this works in companies. But anyway.
Yeah.
Go on.
For ink, I'm going to go with the Mont Blanc Honoré de Balzac Dandy Turquoise. I love this ink. It really, really is a lovely ink. I have 2 partially used bottles of it, and I'm kind of trying, like a lot of my chromatics inks, or my Caran d'Ache Colors of the Earth inks, I'm not inking them up as much as I want to because I want them to last a long time. I think the other ones would, if I had to pick between them, I'd want a green, so maybe Mont Blanc Irish Green, or Caran d'Ache Colors of the Earth Grand Canyon, which is my favorite brown of all time, but it's not being made anymore. And then for paper, I would have to say it's probably a toss-up between a Franklin Christoph notebook or a Tomoe River notebook from one of the people who make notebooks of Tomoe River. I love Tomoe River paper. I use it for all of my letter writing. It's not as great in a book format just because it takes so long to dry, but it's just the way a pen feels on the paper, the sheen of the ink on the paper, it's great. The Franklin Christoph paper is a little bit more textured, very absorbent, fast dry times, but it is so fountain pen friendly, and it's not the cheapest paper in the world, but it's also not the most expensive. So my daily journal is the Franklin Christoph A4 master notebook there, and it's wonderful. So those would probably be my 2 papers. So,
sounds good.
Well, I think we are. I think we're out of time.
Yeah, pretty much the hour mark. So
I think we've got quite a few more questions, so we're probably going to have to do this again, and
probably have to do this 20 more times to get through everything.
Just through the questions, and we'll probably start. I'm thinking what we may want to do is start doing some kind of like themes. So we've got enough questions for us to go back and forth with more of these, the questions that we got before. But I got no problems ripping off Brian Goulet's Q&A theme. We probably won't be able to do it every week, but something like that. So
yeah, that sounds great. I mean, and if you have suggestions, let us know. I mean, it's clearly it's easy to come up with inks, paper, whatever, nib materials, filling systems. You can do this. That's not difficult, and otherwise we will do it. But I think that's a great idea to give it some type of focus. Otherwise, it's very random as it was now, which is fine because I really enjoyed this. But a theme might be nice. Yeah.
Yep. Well, so for those who have asked, this has been recorded and will be available on both Stephen's and on my channels. And so it may be a little while because I'm going to have to download it. We're going to have to edit it and re-upload it to our individual channels. But it's been fun. I've enjoyed this quite a bit. And thank you for the 67, 68 people who joined us this time around. It's been a lot of fun. And we'll see you here next time.
Gladly.
Yep. So if I may quote one of my favorite pen reviewers, bye-bye.
Bye.